Dad and daughter went camping in Joshua Tree Desert and simply disappeared. No bodies, no trail, nothing. 4 years later, a drone operator discovered something that defied explanation. But the real shock is just beginning. What the drone captured that day wasn't just their missing tent. It was sitting in a place that should have been impossible to reach by human hands. October 2017. The morning sun painted Joshua Tree National Park in shades of gold and amber. Mike Carson, a 38-year-old mechanic from San Bernardino, loaded his blue Ford pickup with camping gear. His 8-year-old daughter Emma bounced excitedly in the passenger seat, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, can we see the funny trees again?" Emma asked, pressing her face against the window. Mike smiled. "All the Joshua trees you want, sweetheart. Just you and me this weekend." This wasn't their first trip to Joshua Tree. Mike had been bringing Emma here since she was 5, teaching her to identify desert plants and showing her how the massive rock formations looked like sleeping giants. For a single father working 2 jobs, these camping trips were precious time with his daughter. They arrived at Hidden Valley Campground just after noon. The October heat was manageable, perfect camping weather. Mike chose their usual spot, Site 23, tucked between 2 massive boulder formations that provided natural windbreaks. Emma immediately began exploring while Mike set up their orange 2-person tent. "Stay where I can see you," Mike called out as Emma climbed on the rocks nearby. By evening, they had collected interesting stones, spotted a roadrunner, and roasted hot dogs over their camp stove. Emma fell asleep in her sleeping bag just after 8, exhausted from the day's adventures. Mike sat outside the tent for another hour, enjoying the desert silence and the brilliant stars overhead. Neither of them knew this would be their last normal moment together. But this was only the beginning of something far more disturbing. The next morning, October 15th, other campers noticed something odd. The blue pickup truck was still parked at Site 23, but there was no movement around the campsite. No morning coffee brewing, no sounds of a father and daughter starting their day. By noon, when checkout time passed, a park volunteer went to investigate. The scene was eerily normal. The tent stood exactly as it should, zipped closed. The camp stove sat clean on the picnic table. Emma's small backpack hung from a tree branch where she always put it. Mike's hiking boots were lined up neatly beside the tent entrance. But Mike and Emma Carson were gone. The volunteer called park rangers immediately. Within hours, a search operation began that would become one of the most extensive in Joshua Tree's history. Rangers, volunteers, and search dogs combed every trail, every rock formation, every possible hiding spot within a 5-mile radius. They found absolutely nothing. No footprints leading away from the camp. No disturbance in the tent. No signs of struggle. Mike's wallet sat untouched in the truck. Emma's favorite water bottle remained full inside the tent. Even more puzzling, their hiking boots were still there, meaning they had wandered into the harsh desert barefoot. "It's like they just vanished into thin air," said Ranger Patricia Mills, who led the search effort. The investigation expanded. Helicopters circled overhead. Search teams spread out across hundreds of square miles. Local news crews arrived, turning the quiet campground into a media circus. Mike's sister Jennifer flew in from Portland, pleading on television for any information. "Mike would never leave Emma alone," she sobbed into the cameras. "Something terrible happened to them." Days turned into weeks. The searches continued, but hope faded with each passing day. Theories emerged. Everything from animal attacks to abduction to the family simply getting lost and succumbing to exposure. but none explained the lack of evidence, the missing footprints, the untouched campsite. After a month, the active search was called off. The case remained open, but there were no leads to follow. And then the years passed in painful silence. Mike's sister Jennifer never stopped believing they were alive somewhere. She hired private investigators. She organized annual searches on the anniversary of their disappearance. She posted their photos on missing persons websites and social media groups. The Joshua Tree campsite became a kind of shrine. Other campers would leave flowers at Site 23. Rangers reported seeing Jennifer there on quiet weekdays, sitting alone on the rocks where Emma used to play. Years accumulated like desert dust. 2018, 2019, 2020. The story faded from news cycles. New missing persons cases took priority. The Carson family became another unsolved mystery in the vast catalog of people who simply vanish without explanation. But in October 2021, exactly 4 years after their disappearance, something impossible happened. This is where the story takes its most shocking turn. Marcus Webb, a freelance photographer and drone operator, was commissioned to capture aerial footage for a Joshua Tree tourism documentary. He had flown dozens of missions over the park, knowing every rock formation and trail from above. On October 14th, 2021, one day before the 4-year anniversary, Marcus launched his drone for what should have been a routine flight over the Hidden Valley area. At first, everything looked normal through his camera feed. The familiar boulder formations, the scattered Joshua trees, the network of hiking trails below. He was getting beautiful shots of the desert landscape bathed in late afternoon light. Then, something caught his eye. In a remote area about 3 miles northeast of Hidden Valley Campground, nestled between 2 massive rock walls in a narrow canyon, sat something that shouldn't exist. A tent, an orange tent, sitting perfectly upright in the sand. Marcus zoomed in with his drone camera, his heart beginning to race. The tent looked fresh, new, as if it had just been set up. But this location was completely inaccessible, surrounded by sheer rock walls over 30 feet high. There was no trail leading to it, no way for hikers to reach this spot. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered to himself. He maneuvered the drone closer, taking high-resolution photos from every angle. The tent was definitely orange, exactly matching the description from the Carson case files that had obsessed the local community for years. But how could it be there? Marcus immediately called the park rangers, but what they discovered next would shatter everything they thought they knew. Within 2 hours, a technical rescue team was assembled. Using ropes and climbing equipment, 2 experienced rangers rappelled down the canyon walls to reach the mysterious tent. Ranger Patricia Mills, the same ranger who had led the original search 4 years earlier, was first to touch the tent fabric. "Control, this is Mills," she radioed up to the team above. "The tent it's in perfect condition. No weather damage, no fading. It looks like it was set up yesterday." She carefully unzipped the entrance, her hands shaking slightly. Inside, she found 2 sleeping bags laid out neatly. A small stuffed rabbit, Emma's rabbit, sat propped against one wall. A water bottle, still half full. A child's drawing of Joshua trees and stick figures labeled "Me and Daddy." But no bodies, no bones, no explanation for how the tent had arrived in this impossible location. The canyon walls were examined inch by inch. There were no rope marks, no signs that anyone had rappelled down as the rescue team had done. The sand around the tent showed no footprints, no disturbance patterns. It was as if the tent had been placed there by some invisible force. "This defies every law of physics I know," said Dr. Sarah Chen, a geology professor brought in to examine the site. "Those canyon walls are impassable. No human could have placed that tent there." The discovery made national news. Experts flew in from across the country. The FBI reopened their investigation. Theories ranged from elaborate hoaxes to supernatural phenomena, but the most disturbing detail was yet to be revealed. When forensic teams processed the tent contents, they made a chilling discovery. The stuffed rabbit, Emma's beloved companion that she never went anywhere without, contained something hidden inside. Sewn into the rabbit's belly was a small digital memory card. The card contained a single video file recorded on a device that was never found. The timestamp showed October 15th, 2017, the day after Mike and Emma vanished. The video was only 43 seconds long. It showed Emma, very much alive, sitting in what appeared to be a cave or underground chamber. She was speaking directly to the camera, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Jennifer," she said, using her aunt's name. "Daddy says to tell you we're okay. We found a secret place where the desert keeps its treasures. The funny rocks opened up for us, just like in fairy tales." Emma held up her stuffed rabbit, the same rabbit found in the tent 4 years later. "Mr. Bunny wants to go home now, but Daddy says we have to stay with the desert people. They're very nice, but they live in the deep places where the sun doesn't go." The video became fuzzy for a moment, filled with static. When it cleared, Emma was still there, but something in her eyes looked different, older, distant. "Don't look for us in the bright places," she whispered. "We live in the underneath now, but someday, when the rocks decide, maybe we'll come back to say hello." The video ended abruptly. Analysis of the footage raised more questions than answers. Digital forensics experts confirmed the video was authentic, not manipulated or fabricated. The timestamp matched perfectly with the day after their disappearance, but the location where it was filmed remained a mystery. Geologists studied every frame of the background, looking for clues about the cave or chamber Emma mentioned. They found rock formations that seemed to match certain areas of Joshua Tree, but none that could be definitively identified. The reference to desert people and the underneath sparked dozens of theories. Some researchers pointed to Native American legends of spirit dwellers in the desert. Others suggested the possibility of undiscovered cave systems beneath the park. But perhaps the most unsettling detail was Emma's appearance in the video. Though supposedly filmed just 1 day after their disappearance, she looked older. Her face had a maturity that hadn't been there during the camping trip. Her speech patterns were more sophisticated, as if she had aged months or years in a single day. And then, just when investigators thought they had seen everything. 3 weeks after the tent discovery, Marcus Webb, the drone operator who had found it, reported another impossible sighting. During a follow-up flight over the same canyon, his drone captured footage of 2 figures walking among the Joshua trees in a remote area of the park. The footage was distant and blurry, but the size differential suggested an adult and a child. By the time rangers reached the location, they found only footprints in the sand. Small prints that matched Emma's shoe size, and larger ones consistent with Mike's measurements. But the prints led to a rock face and simply stopped, as if the walkers had disappeared into solid stone. The footprints were fresh, less than an hour old according to desert tracking experts. Every time we think we understand this case, it becomes more impossible, said FBI agent Diana Ross, assigned to the investigation. We're dealing with something that challenges our basic understanding of how people can exist in physical space. Jennifer Carson, now 44 and graying prematurely from years of searching, visited the canyon where the tent was found. She sat alone in the desert for hours, calling her brother's name and Emma's name, hoping for some kind of response. She swears that as the sun set that evening, she heard Emma's laughter echoing off the canyon walls. But the mystery was far from over. In the months following the tent discovery, other strange reports began surfacing from Joshua Tree visitors. Hikers reported seeing a man and young girl in the distance, always in areas that were later confirmed to be inaccessible. Campers heard a child singing at night, but could never locate the source of the voice. Park rangers began keeping an unofficial log of these sightings. The descriptions were remarkably consistent. A tall man with dark hair and a small girl with pigtails, always wearing the same clothes Mike and Emma had been wearing on their last morning. But whenever approached, the figures would seem to fade into the landscape itself. Dr. Chen, the geologist, became obsessed with finding a scientific explanation. She spent months mapping underground water systems and examining geological surveys for evidence of hidden cave networks. There are limestone formations beneath parts of Joshua Tree that could theoretically contain caverns, she explained. But nothing we've discovered could account for the scale of space these sightings suggest. Her research team used ground-penetrating radar in the areas where Emma and Mike had been spotted. They found unusual density variations in the rock, suggesting hollow spaces deep underground. But every attempt to locate entrances to these supposed chambers ended in failure. As the second anniversary of the tent discovery approached, another breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A maintenance worker at Joshua Tree, cleaning out old storage facilities, discovered a box of items left by previous park employees. Among them was a handwritten journal from the 1960s, kept by a ranger named Thomas Hartwell. The journal contained dozens of entries about the vanishing families, cases remarkably similar to the Carson disappearance. Hartwell described at least 6 instances over a 15-year period where campers had vanished without a trace, only to be glimpsed years later in impossible locations throughout the park. One entry, dated July 1967, was particularly chilling. Saw the Matthews family again today, near Skull Rock. It's been 3 years since they disappeared from their campsite. The children look exactly the same age as when they vanished, but there's something different about their eyes. When I called out to them, the father looked at me and shook his head slowly, as if warning me to stay away. Then they walked directly into the rock face and disappeared. Another entry from 1969 mentioned finding belongings from missing persons in locations that defied the possibility of human placement. The journal suggested that the Carson case was not unique, but part of a pattern spanning decades. But Hartwell's final entries told an even more disturbing story. According to his last journal entry, dated October 1971, Hartwell had become convinced that Joshua Tree National Park existed on some kind of dimensional boundary. The indigenous peoples were right about this place, he wrote. The Kemohevi and Mojave tribes spoke of the thin places where the world of the living touches something else. I believe certain families are chosen, drawn to camp in specific locations during specific times. They don't die. They transition to a parallel existence within the same landscape. Hartwell's theory was that these missing families continued to exist in a version of Joshua Tree that occupied the same physical space but existed outside normal time and physics. I've seen evidence that they age differently there, experience time differently. The children in particular seem to exist in a state of extended childhood, while retaining memories and wisdom from their original lives. The journal ended abruptly with a note that Hartwell himself had resigned from the Park Service and moved away, claiming he could no longer distinguish between the normal visitors and the transitioned ones. Research into Hartwell's background revealed that he had indeed worked at Joshua Tree from 1954 to 1971 and had filed numerous missing persons reports during his tenure. Park records showed at least 12 families had vanished during his years of service, with circumstances remarkably similar to the Carson case. As investigators delved deeper into the park's history, they uncovered something that changed everything. Geological surveys from the 1940s, conducted before Joshua Tree became a national park, contained references to anomalous magnetic readings in several areas of the desert. These readings suggested the presence of metallic deposits or unusual mineral formations deep underground. But when modern equipment was used to replicate these surveys, the magnetic anomalies had completely disappeared. Dr. Chen theorized that whatever geological features had created these readings in the 1940s had somehow changed or been sealed off over the decades. She proposed that these areas might have been natural portals or dimensional weak points that had gradually closed. If Hartwell's theory is correct, she explained, then the Carson family may have encountered one of the last remaining active sites. Their disappearance might mark the end of a phenomenon that's been occurring here for generations. This theory gained support when researchers discovered that all the documented disappearances at Joshua Tree had occurred within a 3-mile radius of each other, in an area that overlapped perfectly with the 1940s magnetic anomalies. But just when the scientific community thought they had found an explanation, the Carson family made contact again. In October 2023, exactly 6 years after their disappearance, Jennifer Carson received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was Emma's camp journal, a small notebook the 8-year-old had been keeping during their camping trips. The journal contained entries that had never been there before, written in Emma's distinctive handwriting, but with a sophistication far beyond her years. The new entries described life in the underneath places. She wrote about vast caverns filled with bioluminescent crystals, underground rivers that flowed upward, and communities of families who had crossed over from the surface world over many decades. Time works differently here. One entry read, "I've been 8 years old for 6 years now, but I remember everything from before. Daddy takes care of me, but he's also learning from the other parents who came before us. There are children here from the 1960s who still look like children but know things adults don't know." Another entry described the surface world as the bright place where people forget magic is real. But the most significant entry was the last one. "Aunt Jennifer, I know you're reading this. Daddy says it's almost time for the rocks to open again. When they do, we might be able to visit, but just for a little while. Look for us at Site 23 on the night when the moon is dark and the Joshua trees cast no shadows. We have so much to tell you about the secret desert. The implications of Emma's journal entries sent shockwaves through the research community. If the entries were authentic, and handwriting analysis suggested they were, then the Carson family was not only alive but living in some kind of parallel environment beneath or within Joshua Tree National Park. Jennifer Carson, now desperate for any chance to see her family again, began camping at Site 23 on every new moon, waiting for the promised visit. Park rangers, sympathetic to her situation but concerned for her safety, maintained discreet surveillance of her vigils. For months, nothing happened. Then, on the new moon of March 2024, something extraordinary occurred. Jennifer was sitting alone at the picnic table where Mike and Emma had eaten their last known meal, when she heard footsteps approaching through the darkness. She looked up to see two familiar silhouettes walking toward her through the Joshua trees. Mike looked exactly as he had 6.5 years earlier, but his eyes held a depth of experience that hadn't been there before. Emma appeared to be the same 8-year-old girl who had vanished, but when she spoke, her voice carried an unusual wisdom. "Hi, Jennifer," Emma said, settling onto the bench beside her aunt. "We can only stay until sunrise." What happened during that reunion would forever change how Jennifer understood reality. According to Jennifer's detailed account, Mike and Emma spent the entire night describing their life in what they called the deep desert. They spoke of a hidden ecosystem where the laws of physics operated differently, where time flowed in spirals rather than straight lines, and where consciousness could exist independently of normal biological constraints. "We're not dead," Mike explained. "We're not even missing in the traditional sense. We've just shifted to a different layer of the same place. Joshua Tree exists on multiple levels, and most people only experience the surface level." Emma showed Jennifer drawings she had made of the underground world, vast chambers lit by crystals, cities carved into living rock, and communities of families who had transitioned over the course of many decades. "There are children here who arrived in the 1950s, Emma said. "They've learned so much about how the world really works. They teach us about the connections between all living things, about how consciousness can travel through stone and time." But the most shocking revelation came when Jennifer asked why they had chosen to cross over. Mike's explanation challenged everything investigators thought they knew about the case. "We didn't choose it, exactly," Mike said. "We were chosen. The desert recognizes certain families, certain combinations of people who can serve as bridges between the worlds. Emma has a special sensitivity to the energies here. She could hear the calling from the deep places even before we disappeared." Emma nodded solemnly. "I knew something was different about that last camping trip. The rocks were humming, and the Joshua trees kept whispering my name. When we went to sleep that night, I dreamed about falling through the sand into a beautiful cave. When I woke up, we were already there." According to their account, the transition happened during the early hours of October 15th, 2017. They had been pulled into a dimensional shift while sleeping, emerging in the underground realm fully conscious but no longer bound by surface world physics. "The tent you found 4 years later was our gift to you," Mike explained. "We placed it there to let you know we were okay, that we hadn't suffered." The video in Emma's rabbit was our way of trying to explain what had happened. But when Jennifer asked if they could return permanently to the surface world, Emma's expression grew sad. "We belong to the deep desert now," she said. "Our bodies have adapted to exist here. If we tried to stay in the bright world for too long, we would fade away completely. But we can visit sometimes, on special nights when the barriers are thin." As dawn approached, the impossible reunion came to an end. Jennifer begged them to stay longer, to find a way to return permanently. But Mike shook his head gently. "This is our home now," he said, "and in many ways, it's a better existence than what we had before." Emma is learning things no child on the surface could ever learn. We're part of something larger than ourselves. Emma hugged her aunt tightly. "Don't be sad," she whispered. "We're not gone. We're just living in the secret part of the world, and maybe someday, when you're ready, you can visit us too." As the first light of dawn touched the Joshua trees, Mike and Emma began to become translucent. Jennifer could see through them to the desert landscape beyond. "Look for our signs," Mike said, his voice growing faint. "We'll leave you messages when we can. And remember, the desert keeps its treasures safe." With those words, they faded completely, leaving Jennifer alone at the picnic table with only the memory of their touch and the lingering scent of desert sage. In the weeks following the reunion, Jennifer's life changed dramatically. She quit her job in Portland and moved to 29 Palms, the town closest to Joshua Tree National Park. She became a volunteer with the Park Service, helping with search and rescue operations for other missing persons cases. But more importantly, she began documenting what she called the deeper mysteries of Joshua Tree. She interviewed longtime park employees, researched historical disappearances, and collected stories from visitors who claimed to have encountered impossible phenomena in the desert. Her research revealed that the Carson case was indeed part of a much larger pattern. Over the past century, dozens of families had vanished from Joshua Tree under similar circumstances. Many had been glimpsed years later in impossible locations, always unchanged, always existing just beyond the reach of normal investigation. Jennifer also discovered that certain Native American tribes had legends about Joshua Tree as a crossing place where spirits could move between worlds. The Kemewevi people spoke of families who had been adopted by the desert and who lived in the stone cities beneath the sand. But Jennifer's most significant discovery came from an unexpected source. While cleaning out a storage unit that had belonged to Thomas Hartwell, the ranger who had kept the journal from the 1960s, Jennifer found a metal box containing photographs and documents that Hartwell had apparently hidden before leaving the Park Service. The photographs showed families posing at various Joshua Tree locations over several decades, but what made them extraordinary was that the same people appeared in photos taken years apart, completely unchanged by time. One series of photos showed a family of 4 taken in 1958, 1963, and 1969. In each photo, they looked exactly the same age, wearing the same clothes, standing in the same poses. But the backgrounds showed different seasons, different lighting, different stages of plant growth around them. Another set of photos documented a young couple who appeared in Joshua Tree photographs spanning 15 years, from 1962 to 1977, without aging a single day. But the most shocking photographs were the ones that showed Mike and Emma Carson. The final photographs in Hartwell's collection would rewrite the entire Carson story. 3 black and white photos, dated 1965, 1968, and 1970, clearly showed Mike Carson and Emma Carson standing among the Joshua trees. They looked exactly as they had in 2017, wearing the same clothes they had worn on their last camping trip. The photos were labeled in Hartwell's handwriting. Recurring visitors, the Carsons, appear every 3 to 4 years in Sector 7. Do not approach. Friendly but unable to communicate about their origins. According to Hartwell's notes, the Carson family had been appearing at Joshua Tree for decades before their official disappearance in 2017. They were part of a community of transitioned families who occasionally manifested in the surface world, always unchanged, always elusive. Jennifer's discovery suggested that Mike and Emma hadn't become lost in 2017. They had been found. Their camping trip had been the moment when they finally transitioned permanently to the deep desert realm, where they had apparently belonged all along. The implications were staggering. If the photographs were authentic, then the Carson family existed outside normal time, appearing in the surface world at intervals across many decades. As Jennifer shared her discoveries with researchers, the full scope of the Joshua Tree phenomenon began to emerge. Dr. Chen, working with a team of quantum physicists, proposed a theory that Joshua Tree National Park exists at a convergence point of multiple dimensional realities. According to her research, certain locations on Earth naturally function as bridges between parallel versions of the same space. What we're seeing at Joshua Tree, she explained, is evidence that consciousness can exist simultaneously across multiple timelines. The families who disappear aren't moving to a different place. They're moving to a different version of the same place, one that exists outside our normal space-time framework. This theory was supported by reports from other national parks with similar phenomena. Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and Great Smoky Mountains all had documented cases of families vanishing under mysterious circumstances, only to be glimpsed years later in impossible locations. But Joshua Tree seemed to be the most active site, possibly due to its unique geology and the presence of magnetic minerals deep underground. The Carson case officially remains unsolved, but Jennifer knows the truth. Every few months, Jennifer receives small signs that Mike and Emma are still aware of the surface world. A child's drawing left on her doorstep showing underground crystal caves, a message written in the sand near Site 23, visible only at certain angles of sunlight. Photographs that appear in her camera with no memory of taking them, showing glimpses of the hidden desert realm. She has also begun documenting other families who seem to be called by Joshua Tree. Certain visitors display the same sensitivity Emma had shown. Children who claim to hear voices in the wind, parents who feel inexplicably drawn to specific locations, families who camp in the areas where previous disappearances occurred. Jennifer now believes she serves as a guardian of the gateway, helping to identify and support families who may be approaching their own transition to the deep desert. "I used to think disappearing was the worst thing that could happen to a family," she says. "Now I understand that for some people it's not a tragedy, it's a calling. Mike and Emma found their true home. They're exactly where they're supposed to be. But the story doesn't end there. As recently as last month, park rangers reported another impossible sighting. A family of 3, 2 parents and a teenage boy, were seen walking among the Joshua trees in an area that had been confirmed empty just minutes before. The family matched the description of the Hendersons, who disappeared from Joshua Tree in 1999. Like the Carsons, they looked exactly as they had on the day they vanished, unchanged by 25 years. When rangers approached, the family smiled and waved, then walked directly into a rock formation and disappeared. In the sand where they had stood, investigators found a single message traced with a finger: "The desert keeps its promises." Jennifer Carson continues her research, documenting each new sighting, each impossible encounter. She maintains that Joshua Tree is not just a national park. It's a living entity that chooses certain families to join its hidden ecosystem. And sometimes, on clear desert nights when the moon is dark and the Joshua trees cast no shadows, visitors to Site 23 report hearing the sound of a father and daughter laughing together, their voices echoing from deep beneath the sand, promising that love transcends even the boundaries between worlds. The Carson family disappeared from Joshua Tree National Park in October 2017. Their tent was found 4 years later in an impossible location, containing evidence of their continued existence in a realm that overlaps our own but operates by different rules. Whether you believe in dimensional convergence or prefer more conventional explanations, one truth remains: the desert keeps its secrets, and some mysteries are meant to stay that way. The investigation continues, but the answers may exist in places where human science cannot yet reach. In the deep desert, where time flows differently and love proves stronger than the laws of physics, Mike and Emma Carson have found their eternal home.